The marble-floored lobby of the Marquise Hotel sparkled under the glow of crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, casting a soft, opulent light over the entire room. Sunlight streamed in through the tall glass doors, mixing with the chandelier's glow, creating an inviting warmth. Every corner of the lobby was meticulously decorated, from the lush, dark green plants arranged around the seating areas to the richly upholstered chairs and leather couches. To most people, it looked like the perfect oasis, a place where wealth met class, a symbol of status. And today, that status had new owners, though none of the staff knew it yet. The Jones family walked into the lobby with a subtle mix of excitement and pride. For Eric and his wife, Denise, this wasn't just a place to stay, it was the fulfillment of years of sacrifice, hard work, and finally, a dream come true. They'd always imagined what it would be like to own a space that could bring people joy and relaxation, a place that could feel like home even to strangers. Their teenage son, Jaden, pulled at the straps of his backpack, glancing around the lobby with wide eyes. He tried to play it cool, but the way his gaze lingered on every detail gave him away. This hotel would be his family's legacy, and he couldn't help but feel a thrill at the thought. "This place is amazing," Jaden whispered to his parents, his voice full of awe. He kept his voice low but couldn't hide his grin. Eric chuckled and patted Jaden on the shoulder. "This is just the beginning, son. Wait until you see the suite we've got planned for tonight." Denise smiled, her eyes twinkling as she surveyed the luxurious surroundings. "All those years of saving and working long hours, it's worth it now, isn't it?" Eric squeezed her hand. "Every second." But their quiet moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Standing behind the front desk, observing the new guests, was a middle-aged man with a crisp navy blue suit and a name tag that read Ronald. His expression, however, was anything but welcoming. A slight scowl creased his forehead, and he watched the family with an air of suspicion as they approached. As they neared the counter, Ronald's eyes flickered over each of them, pausing briefly at Jaden. His smile was as polished as the lobby floors, but something in his gaze felt condescending, a kind of silent appraisal that left a hint of unease in the air. Eric felt the change immediately. He'd seen that look before in other places, in other people. It was the look that questioned without words, "Do you really belong here?" Eric cleared his throat as he stepped forward. "Hello, we're here to check in. We should have a reservation under Jones." Ronald's eyes lingered on Eric for a moment longer than necessary. He reached slowly for the computer keyboard, his fingers deliberately tapping in the name, but with a reluctance that didn't go unnoticed by the family. Jones, Ronald muttered, scanning the screen. "I'm not seeing a reservation for that name." Eric's brows knitted slightly. He knew they'd confirmed the reservation days ago, and he distinctly remembered the concierge mentioning that everything was set for their arrival. He kept his tone calm, but there was a slight edge to it as he replied, "We booked the presidential suite. It should be under Eric Jones." Ronald raised a skeptical eyebrow and continued typing with exaggerated slowness, making a point to sigh as he searched. "I'm not finding any records under Jones in our system. Are you sure you have the correct hotel?" His eyes flickered to Denise and then to Jaden, who was starting to shift uncomfortably under the man's scrutiny. Denise leaned in, her voice polite but firm. "Yes, we're sure. We received a confirmation email from this very hotel." Ronald's gaze shifted, barely masking his irritation. He glanced at the family, his tone just a shade too dismissive as he said, "Sometimes online bookings can get mixed up. If you don't have proof of your reservation, I'm afraid there's not much I can do." Eric pulled out his phone, scrolling through his emails before holding up the screen to Ronald. "Here's the confirmation. It clearly states that we have the presidential suite reserved for tonight." For a brief moment, Ronald's face twitched, an almost imperceptible flash of annoyance crossing his features. But instead of acknowledging his mistake, he barely glanced at the phone before saying, "I'm sorry, but it looks like there's been an issue with the suite. We're fully booked for the weekend, so I'm not sure there's anything available for you at this time." Denise's expression darkened. She wasn't one to create a scene, but she could feel the subtle hints of bias woven through the conversation. They weren't causing trouble, and they certainly weren't mistaken. This was their hotel, their family's accomplishment, and here they were, being treated as if they were intruders. "I'd like to speak with the manager," she said, her voice steady but unyielding. Ronald's demeanor turned cold. I assure you, ma'am, the manager is quite busy. There's nothing he could do in this situation that I haven't already done. That's interesting, Denise replied coolly, crossing her arms. Because as a customer, I'd imagine the manager would want to ensure that all guests feel welcomed in his establishment. A silence fell over the counter, and a few guests in the lobby glanced over at the rising tension. Ronald shifted uneasily, sensing that his usual tactics weren't going over well with this family. He hesitated, clearly caught between his own assumptions and the realization that this family wasn't about to walk away quietly. After an awkward pause, Ronald managed a tight smile. "I'll see if the manager can step away from his meeting," he muttered, disappearing behind the counter. The family exchanged a look, each of them feeling the weight of the experience in different ways. Jaden looked at his parents, his face a mixture of confusion and disappointment. Do people really get treated like this? Just because of? He trailed off, glancing around the room filled with guests who looked nothing like them. Denise placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Unfortunately, yes, but it doesn't mean we have to accept it. Sometimes standing up for ourselves is the best way to show people that we belong anywhere we choose to be. Eric nodded, his jaw set as he tried to push back his frustration. And that's exactly what we're doing, Jaden. Remember this place, this hotel, it's ours now. No one can make us feel otherwise. As they waited, Denise glanced around the lobby, her gaze lingering on the polished marble floors and the grand piano tucked into a corner, its lacquered surface reflecting the light. Despite the treatment they'd received, she still felt a surge of pride. This was just the beginning of a journey that would change not only their lives but the lives of everyone who entered this hotel. But first, they had to make sure their message was heard loud and clear. Ronald reappeared, his demeanor slightly less self-assured as he gestured for them to follow him. "The manager will see you now." They were led down a short hallway, the plush carpet muffling their footsteps as they approached an elegantly appointed office. The manager, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a warm smile, rose from behind his desk, extending his hand as they entered. "Good afternoon, I'm David Collins, the hotel manager," he greeted, his tone far more welcoming than that of his employee. "I understand there's been a bit of a mix-up. How can I assist you?" Denise didn't waste any time. "Mr. Collins, we're here under the impression that we had a suite reserved, yet your front desk clerk seems unable to locate our reservation despite our confirmation email." David's eyes narrowed slightly as he glanced toward Ronald, who looked away, his posture stiffening. "I apologize for the inconvenience. Let me personally look into this." He moved to his computer, and after a few moments of typing, nodded. "Ah, here we are, Eric and Denise Jones' presidential suite." He looked up, his smile returning. "Everything is in order. I apologize again for any misunderstanding." Denise exchanged a glance with Eric, a slight nod passing between them. The manager's professionalism was a relief, but it didn't erase the sting of the initial treatment. They would address this with Ronald soon enough, but for now they simply wanted to begin their stay and discuss plans to ensure no guest would have to face such indignity in the future. "Thank you," Eric said. "We'd appreciate it if our experience moving forward reflected the respect and courtesy you've shown us." "Of course," David replied, casting a meaningful look at Ronald. "And I'll make sure all of our staff receive proper training on how to welcome each guest with the utmost professionalism. Enjoy your stay." With the issue resolved, the family was escorted to the elevator that would take them up to their suite, but each of them knew this was only the start. This hotel represented more than just a business, it was their legacy, a place where everyone would be treated with respect and dignity. And they intended to make sure it lived up to that promise. As the elevator ascended, Eric, Denise, and Jaden stood in a comfortable silence, each absorbing the events that had just unfolded in the lobby. Though they felt a certain satisfaction that justice had been served, an undercurrent of frustration lingered. They'd dealt with dismissive glances and microaggressions before, but this was supposed to be their moment, a celebration of what they'd achieved, the fruits of years of tireless work and sacrifice. The elevator chimed softly, and the doors opened onto a plush hallway with rich, dark wood paneling and a patterned carpet leading the way. They stepped out, looking around, and followed the signs to the presidential suite. The suite itself was magnificent. Tall windows framed a stunning view of the city skyline, the lights beginning to twinkle against the evening sky. A grand chandelier hung over the living area, casting a warm, luxurious glow. To the left, a spacious bedroom awaited, with a king-size bed draped in fine linens. Denise and Eric exchanged a glance, both recognizing the sense of accomplishment that this moment represented. "Wow," Jaden whispered, his voice echoing slightly in the vast space. He moved over to the window, pressing his hands against the glass as he took in the view. "We really own this, don't we?" Eric joined him, resting a hand on his son's shoulder. "Yes, we do. And one day all of this might be yours." Jaden nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the city below. After a moment he spoke, his voice more subdued. "Why didn't that man downstairs want us here, though? I don't understand. I mean, we weren't doing anything wrong." Denise sighed, her expression softening as she moved closer to them. Sometimes people make judgments based on what they think they know. They see someone who looks a certain way and jump to conclusions. But that's their problem, not ours. Eric's jaw tightened slightly. He had hoped their son would be shielded from such blatant prejudice, especially in a place that they would soon be running as owners. But life, he knew, rarely offered such assurances. Denise took a seat on the couch, and after a moment, both Eric and Jaden joined her. They sat together, the weight of the situation settling on them as they shared a quiet moment of reflection. But the silence didn't last long. A knock at the door interrupted their thoughts. Eric rose, heading to answer it. When he opened the door, he found himself face to face with Ronald, the front desk clerk. His expression was a mixture of discomfort and barely concealed resentment, though he managed a stiff smile. "Good evening, Mr. Jones," Ronald said, his voice clipped. "I wanted to personally apologize for the confusion downstairs. It appears there was a mix-up in our system." Eric folded his arms, his gaze steady. "A mix-up, was it? Interesting, because the confirmation was right there on your screen." Ronald's smile faltered, and he cast a quick glance over his shoulder, as if hoping someone might save him from the conversation. But no one was there, and he was left standing alone in the doorway, under Eric's scrutinizing gaze. "Yes, well," Ronald stammered, his composure slipping. "We do our best to accommodate all our guests here at the Marquise. It's a very diverse establishment." Eric's eyebrow arched. "I certainly hope so. Because from where we were standing downstairs, it didn't feel very accommodating." Denise, who had been listening, rose and walked over to stand beside her husband. "We came here for a special occasion," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But instead of being welcomed, we were met with suspicion. That's not the kind of first impression I'd expect from a place like this." Ronald shifted uncomfortably, clearly unprepared for the directness of the confrontation. He cleared his throat, clutching the notepad he held as if it were a lifeline. "I apologize if that's how it came across. It certainly wasn't my intention." Jaden, who had been standing off to the side, finally spoke up. "Then why did you treat us like that?" Ronald looked down at the teenager, momentarily at a loss for words. The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswered. Eric finally broke the silence, his tone controlled. "Look, we don't want to make this any more difficult than it needs to be. But you need to understand that people notice these things. A family like ours coming in here and immediately being questioned. It says something." Ronald nodded, his face flushing. "Again, I apologize. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again." Eric studied him for a moment, then nodded, letting the matter rest for now. "Good. Because we plan on being here quite often." Ronald managed a tight smile before excusing himself, retreating down the hallway as quickly as he could. As Eric closed the door, he couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication, but there was still an underlying bitterness. It wasn't just about a single moment of disrespect, it was about the pervasive attitudes that had followed them, even into their own space. Denise took a deep breath, leaning back against the couch. I almost feel sorry for him. He has no idea what he's about to be part of." Eric chuckled, the tension easing as he sat down beside her. "Well, we didn't exactly come here to shake things up, but I don't think I'd mind if that's what happens." Jaden settled into an armchair across from them, his eyes thoughtful. "Does this mean that we'll be in charge of everything here? Like we can make changes if we want to?" Denise nodded, smiling softly. "Exactly. We get to decide how things work around here. and that means creating a place where everyone feels like they belong. Jaden's eyes brightened, and he nodded in understanding. He could already picture the small but powerful changes they would make. No one would have to walk into this lobby and wonder if they were welcome. It was a small start, but it was a start nonetheless. As the evening wore on, the family began discussing their plans for the hotel. They envisioned not just a place of luxury but a space that reflected their values, a hotel where everyone, regardless of their background, would feel respected and valued. They wanted to create an environment where diversity was celebrated, where guests and staff alike could feel a sense of belonging. The hotel's current staff, of course, would be part of that change. People like Ronald might resist at first, but with time and patience, Eric and Denise were confident they could build a team that reflected the inclusive culture they envisioned. Later that night, as the city lights shimmered through the suite's windows, the family found themselves looking out over the skyline, each lost in thought. They knew that challenges lay ahead. This wasn't just about running a business, it was about shaping a space that would make a statement in its own way, and that would take time, commitment, and resilience. The next morning they woke early, energized by a renewed sense of purpose. Over breakfast they discussed everything from menu updates to community events they could host, each idea building on the last. They envisioned hiring a diverse team, training staff on the values of inclusivity, and working to create a reputation that would draw people from all walks of life. But in the back of their minds, each of them knew that the journey wouldn't be without resistance. Change was rarely easy, especially in an environment where certain biases had been left unchecked for so long. Still, they were undeterred. As they walked back into the lobby later that day, heads turned and whispers followed. Some of the staff cast curious glances their way, sensing that this family was more than just another set of guests. Ronald, still behind the front desk, noticed them, and though he managed a polite nod, the tension in his posture was unmistakable. He knew that things were changing, and he knew he would have to adapt whether he liked it or not. The family approached the front desk, and Denise smiled warmly, greeting the other staff members with a friendliness that quickly disarmed them. They introduced themselves not as guests but as the new owners. The announcement was met with a mix of surprise and apprehension, but Denise and Eric's genuine warmth soon eased the initial discomfort. As the day unfolded, Eric and Denise began their first official meetings with the staff. They shared their vision, emphasizing the importance of respect, kindness, and professionalism. They wanted the Marquise to become a beacon of hospitality, a place that would welcome every person who walked through its doors. For the first time, Ronald and the other staff members began to understand that this wasn't just another family coming to stay for the weekend. This was the beginning of a new chapter for the Marquise, a chapter that would be written with a dedication to change and an unwavering commitment to inclusion. Outside, the city bustled with life, but within the walls of the hotel, a quieter transformation was taking place. And as the family settled into their roles as the new stewards of the Marquise, they knew that this would be a place where their dreams and the dreams of countless others could finally feel at home. The atmosphere in the Marquise had shifted subtly in the days following the Jones family's arrival. Behind the scenes, Eric and Denise were hard at work, meeting with department heads, familiarizing themselves with every corner of the hotel, and making sure that the values they held dear would soon become an integral part of the hotel's operations. The transformation wasn't just about outward appearances, it was about setting the foundation for a culture that would echo their principles of dignity and inclusivity. It was early afternoon when Eric and Denise walked through the halls, casually chatting with staff members, remembering faces and names, learning about each person's role and contributions. Their interactions were genuine, free from the stiffness of hierarchical formality. The front desk clerks, housekeepers, and kitchen staff soon found themselves warming up to the new owners, drawn to their down-to-earth approach. Still, Ronald, the clerk whose biases had marred the family's initial experience, maintained a cautious distance, watching them from behind the desk with an unreadable expression. Today was a big day for the Jones family. They had planned an all-staff meeting, where they would formally introduce themselves to the entire team and outline their vision. Word of the meeting had spread quickly, and as the hour approached, a sense of anticipation filled the air. The staff, curious and perhaps a little nervous, gathered in the hotel's largest conference room. It was an elegantly decorated space, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the cityscape and rows of plush chairs facing a small stage. Eric stood by the windows, watching as employees trickled in, murmuring quietly amongst themselves. Denise and Jaden stood beside him, each feeling the weight of the moment in their own way. Jaden, who had been quietly observing his parents' leadership, felt a renewed sense of pride as he looked at the team gathering before him. This was more than a business, it was their legacy. As the room filled, Eric cleared his throat and stepped onto the small stage at the front, glancing out at the assembled staff with a warm smile. Denise stood beside him, her presence calm and reassuring, while Jaden sat in the front row, watching his parents with eager eyes. "Good afternoon, everyone," Eric began, his voice carrying easily across the room. "First, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to join us here today. My wife Denise, our son Jaden, and I are incredibly grateful to be here, and we're honored to join you as part of the Marquise family." There was a gentle rustling of acknowledgement among the staff, some nodding while others looked at the family with a mix of curiosity and surprise. Ronald, sitting toward the back, folded his arms, his expression guarded. Eric continued, "We know that any change in ownership can be unsettling, and it's natural to have questions or concerns, but let me assure you, we're not here to upend everything that makes the Marquise what it is. This hotel has a rich history and a reputation for excellence, and we intend to honor that legacy. Our goal is to build on what's already here, to create a space that is as welcoming for our guests as it is for each of you." Denise nodded, stepping forward with a gentle smile. "To us, the Marquise is more than just a business. It's a place where people from all walks of life can come together, find comfort, and feel at home. But for that to happen, every guest and every member of our team needs to feel valued and respected. So, starting today, we'll be implementing some changes aimed at fostering a culture of inclusivity and kindness." A few murmurs rippled through the room, some staff exchanging puzzled glances. The idea of inclusivity wasn't foreign, but in the world of luxury hotels, where appearances often took precedence over genuine connection, the word carried a weight that felt unusual. Still, most of the staff seemed receptive. Their interest piqued. "We're introducing new training programs focused on hospitality and respect," Denise continued. "These programs will help ensure that every guest feels welcomed and every employee feels supported. We want each of you to feel empowered in your roles, knowing that your work makes a difference." At this, Ronald shifted in his seat, a slight frown creasing his brow. The mention of training seemed to catch his attention, and a flicker of unease crossed his face. Eric noticed the reaction, but he kept his tone steady as he addressed the room. "We know this may sound ambitious, but we truly believe that creating a respectful environment can only enhance the guest experience. If people feel at ease, if they feel respected, then they'll be more likely to come back. And we want that for the Marquise. We want to be known as the hotel where everyone feels they belong." A few heads nodded in agreement, and Eric felt a surge of hope. He knew that creating change wouldn't happen overnight, but seeing the positive reactions gave him confidence that they were on the right path. Just as Eric was about to wrap up, Jaden, who had been sitting quietly in the front row, raised his hand. Eric smiled and nodded, inviting his son to the stage. Jaden stepped up, a bit shy but clearly determined to add his own thoughts. "Hi everyone," he began, glancing around the room nervously. "I just wanted to say that. Well, my parents and I came here a few days ago, and we didn't exactly feel welcomed at first. It's not something I'm used to talking about, but I think it's important, because I know that there are people who don't always get treated the same as everyone else." A silence fell over the room, and several staff members shifted in their seats, their faces reflecting varying degrees of discomfort and introspection. Ronald, in particular, looked down, his expression tense. "But I also believe that people can change," Jaden continued, his voice steadying. "My mom and dad taught me that we all have a choice in how we treat others. And I think we can make the Marquise a place where everyone feels like they matter, no matter who they are or where they're from." Jaden's words hung in the air, resonating with an unexpected power. Denise reached over to squeeze his shoulder, pride shining in her eyes. Eric gave him an encouraging nod, silently thanking his son for his courage. The room remained silent for a moment longer before a soft round of applause broke out, starting with a few employees near the front and quickly spreading through the crowd. Even Ronald joined in, albeit reluctantly, his applause slow and measured. As the applause subsided, Denise stepped forward to close the meeting. "Thank you for your time and for hearing us out. We're here to support you and our doors are always open. If you have any questions, suggestions, or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out to us directly. With that, the meeting concluded, and the staff began to file out of the room, some lingering to chat amongst themselves, exchanging thoughts on the new ownership and the changes that had been announced. Ronald lingered near the back, his expression conflicted. He hadn't expected the new owners to be so, well, involved. It wasn't the kind of management style he was used to, and he wasn't entirely sure how he felt about it. As the room emptied, Eric caught sight of Ronald still standing near the door. Seizing the moment, he approached the clerk, his demeanor calm but purposeful. "Ronald," he greeted, extending his hand. "Thank you for joining us today." Ronald shook his hand, his grip firm but hesitant. "Of course, Mr. Jones. I'm here to support whatever changes you and Mrs. Jones want to implement." Eric nodded, his gaze steady. "That's good to hear. We're looking forward to working with everyone here. And that includes you, Ronald. I know things may feel different, but change can be a good thing." Ronald offered a tight smile, his eyes flickering with uncertainty. "Understood, sir. I'll do my best." Eric watched as Ronald turned to leave, feeling a mixture of hope and apprehension. He sensed that Ronald's words were sincere, but he couldn't ignore the underlying tension. Change, he knew, could be uncomfortable, especially for those who had grown used to a certain way of doing things. But he also knew that this was just the beginning, and he was prepared for the journey ahead. As the family regrouped after the meeting, Denise took Eric's hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "We did the right thing today," she said, her voice filled with quiet conviction. "It might take some time, but I believe they'll come around." Eric nodded, his gaze shifting to Jaden, who looked up at his parents with pride. Together, they walked out of the conference room, their steps filled with purpose. The Marquise Hotel was no longer just a business, it was their mission, their chance to create something lasting. And as they walked through the hallways, the family felt an unspoken bond, a shared commitment to making this place more than just a building. They would make it a home for themselves, for their staff, and for every guest who crossed its threshold. The following days at the Marquise marked the beginning of a slow but meaningful shift within the hotel. The Jones family's vision for an inclusive and respectful environment began to ripple through every department, from housekeeping to the kitchen to guest services. For many of the staff, the new changes felt like a refreshing update, a sign of better days, and a step toward creating a healthier workplace. However, not everyone embraced the change so easily. Ronald, the front desk clerk, remained visibly tense, a hint of resistance shadowing his interactions with guests and colleagues alike. He had spent years in the industry, priding himself on his ability to handle the right kind of clientele. The shift from selective standards to inclusivity threatened his sense of authority, and he struggled to accept the new culture the Jones family sought to cultivate. One afternoon, as Eric and Denise prepared for a departmental training session, they noticed a small group of employees gathered in the staff break room. Curious, they stepped closer, listening in on a heated discussion led by none other than Ronald. His voice was low, but his words carried a hint of disdain as he spoke to a few employees who seemed caught between agreement and discomfort. "I just don't understand it," Ronald muttered, his brow furrowed. "We've been running this place just fine without all this. Extra sensitivity. I mean, it's a hotel. Guests come, they go, we give them a pleasant experience. We don't need to be spoon-feeding anyone with all this inclusivity nonsense." A few of the younger employees glanced at each other uncertainly, clearly uncomfortable with Ronald's tone. Still, they remained silent, either out of respect for his seniority or perhaps out of fear of confrontation. Eric's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure as he stepped forward, clearing his throat to announce his presence. Ronald turned, his expression shifting from annoyance to mild embarrassment as he realized who had overheard his comments. "Ah, Mr. Jones," Ronald stammered, attempting a weak smile. "I didn't see you there." Eric nodded, acknowledging the attempt at decorum. "It's good to see you having a conversation with the team, Ronald," he said evenly. "But I'd like to remind everyone that these changes we're implementing are important to us and to the success of this hotel." Ronald bristled, folding his arms defensively. "With all due respect, sir, I've been in this business a long time. I know what guests expect, and I'm not sure this approach is going to work in the way you think it will." Denise joined her husband, her gaze steady as she addressed Ronald. Ronald, we're not here to change what works. We're here to make it better. We believe that treating every guest with genuine respect and warmth will only enhance the experience, not diminish it. Ronald's expression soured slightly, but he held his tongue, nodding stiffly. If you say so, ma am. Sensing the tension, one of the younger employees, Maya, hesitated before speaking up. Honestly, I think the new approach could be really nice. I mean, it's not just about keeping up appearances, it's about making people feel like they're more than just a transaction. Ronald shot Maya a glare, clearly displeased with her comment. But Maya, encouraged by Eric and Denise's presence, continued, her voice growing bolder. Just the other day, a family came in, and they were surprised when we took the time to remember their names and ask about their stay, she said, her gaze shifting to Eric and Denise with a grateful smile. They said it made them feel welcome, like they were important. I think that's something to be proud of. Eric smiled, nodding approvingly. Exactly, Maya. That's the kind of environment we want to create here. One where guests feel valued not just as paying customers, but as people. Ronald's frown deepened. He wasn't used to being questioned by the junior staff, and he certainly didn't appreciate the new owners encouraging it. But he kept his thoughts to himself, his expression growing colder as he watched Maya and the others nod in agreement with the Joneses. As the group dispersed, Eric placed a hand on Ronald's shoulder, guiding him aside for a private conversation. Denise stayed close, sensing that this conversation would need both of their perspectives to reach any meaningful resolution. Ronald, Eric began, his tone calm but firm. We've noticed you're struggling with some of these changes, and we'd like to understand your concerns. This isn't about dismissing your experience or your role here, it's about making sure we're all moving forward together. Ronald looked down, his expression unreadable. After a moment, he finally spoke, his voice carrying a note of frustration. I don't get why we're changing so much. I've been with the Marquise for years. I know the kind of guests that come through here, and they don't care about all this inclusivity talk. They just want a clean room, good service, and a pleasant stay. Denise nodded, listening intently. I understand where you're coming from, Ronald. But we believe that there's more to hospitality than just providing a room and a bed. People remember how they feel when they walk into a place like this, and if we can make them feel genuinely welcomed, then we've done more than just provide a service, we've created an experience. Ronald remained silent, his expression softening just a bit as he considered her words. Eric, sensing a small opening, added, we know this may feel uncomfortable, but every change comes with some growing pains. We're not trying to erase the past, we're building on it to create something better. The silence stretched between them as Ronald weighed their words, his defenses slowly beginning to lower. He glanced at Denise, then at Eric, his gaze softening just a fraction. It's different, he admitted, a hint of reluctance in his tone. But I suppose I can try. Eric offered a reassuring smile. That's all we're asking, Ronald. We appreciate your experience and we know you bring a lot to this hotel. We just want you to be part of this journey with us. Ronald nodded, the tension in his posture easing slightly. He might not have fully embraced the new approach, but he was willing to give it a chance, if only out of respect for the new owners. As Ronald left the room, Denise turned to Eric, her expression thoughtful. I think that went better than expected, she murmured, a faint smile playing on her lips. Eric chuckled softly. It's a start. We can't expect everyone to change overnight, but if we keep setting an example, I think we'll see a shift. The couple made their way back through the hotel, stopping occasionally to chat with staff and guests alike. Their hands-on approach soon became known throughout the Marquis, and word spread among the staff that the new owners were genuinely invested in the well-being of both guests and employees. Later that evening, Eric and Denise returned to their suite, feeling a sense of accomplishment after the day's events. As they sat together, reflecting on the changes they had begun to implement, Jaden joined them, his eyes bright with excitement. Mom, Dad, you should have seen the front desk earlier, he said, barely containing his enthusiasm. There was this older couple who came in, and Maya remembered their names and asked about their last trip. They looked so surprised, but in a good way. They kept talking about how nice it was that someone remembered them. Denise smiled, reaching over to ruffle Jaden's hair affectionately. That's exactly what we're going for. It's those little details that make a difference. Eric nodded, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. You know, Jaden, we couldn't do this without everyone's help. Each person here, whether they're greeting guests or cleaning rooms, plays a part in making this place special. Jaden looked thoughtful, clearly proud of his family's mission. I think people are starting to notice. Even Ronald seemed a little less grumpy today. Denise chuckled. We'll take that as progress. It's a small step, but it's in the right direction. As the night wore on, the family continued discussing their plans, their dreams for the Marquise taking shape with each passing day. They knew that challenges lay ahead, that not everyone would embrace the changes with open arms. But they also knew that they had each other, and that together they could make a real difference. And as they looked out over the city lights, the Jones family felt a quiet determination settle over them. The Marquis was more than just a hotel. It was a symbol of everything they stood for, a legacy of kindness, respect, and inclusivity that would endure for years to come. The initial changes at the Marquis had planted seeds of transformation, and soon, the impact of the Jones family's presence began to spread throughout the hotel. In the weeks that followed, the staff training sessions became a regular fixture on the calendar, and more employees joined the initiative with an open mind, embracing the vision that Eric and Denise had laid out. The sessions, led by Denise, were both informative and thought-provoking, designed to challenge old assumptions and encourage empathy and inclusivity. On a crisp autumn morning, Eric and Denise held one of the largest training sessions yet, with almost the entire staff gathered in the conference room. The room was filled with employees from every department: front desk clerks, housekeeping, kitchen staff, maintenance workers, and even the more senior managers. There was a shared sense of anticipation, a quiet understanding that today's session would be different. Ronald, whose initial resistance had slowly softened, sat in the front row, his posture slightly stiff but attentive. He had reluctantly attended the first few sessions, often looking for excuses to step out early. But over time, something had shifted in him. He began to realize that this wasn't just about policies or procedures, it was about creating a space where people, both guests and staff, felt genuinely respected and valued. Denise began the session by introducing the theme for the day: redefining hospitality through empathy. She stood at the front of the room, her presence warm and welcoming, yet firm enough to convey the importance of the discussion. Thank you all for being here today, she started, her voice carrying easily over the room. Today's session is a bit different from the others. We're going to look beyond the typical standards of service and explore what it means to truly see and value each person who walks through our doors. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. In our industry, we often hear the phrase, "the guest is always right," but we want to go deeper than that. We want to understand not just what guests expect from us, but how we can make them feel seen, understood, and welcomed in a way that goes beyond the transactional. She glanced at Ronald, who was listening intently, his expression thoughtful. Encouraged by his attention, Denise continued. We all come from different backgrounds with different experiences and perspectives. But here, at the Marquise, we're part of a team, and each of us has the power to make a difference in someone else's day, simply by treating them with kindness and respect. She then introduced an interactive segment, inviting employees to share stories of times when they felt truly welcomed or valued in their own lives. Hands went up around the room as staff members recounted personal experiences, moments of kindness from strangers, a gesture of understanding, or simply a time when someone had shown genuine interest in who they were. The stories were often simple but deeply moving, a testament to the impact that small acts of empathy could have on others. As each story was shared, the atmosphere in the room grew warmer, more connected. Even Ronald found himself nodding along, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. It was a revelation to him, seeing how much these small acts mattered, how they could transform a simple transaction into a meaningful experience. Finally, Denise turned to Ronald directly, offering him a gentle smile. Ronald, I know you've been with the Marquise for many years and your experience is invaluable. Would you be willing to share your thoughts on what hospitality has meant to you? Ronald hesitated, visibly surprised by the invitation. He cleared his throat, glancing around the room before he spoke. Well, I suppose I've always thought of hospitality as a kind of service, making sure things run smoothly, that people are comfortable, and that they don't have anything to complain about. He paused, seeming to search for his words. But I suppose what we're talking about here goes a bit deeper than that. Denise nodded encouragingly. Yes, exactly. It's about creating connections and letting people know they're valued not just as guests but as people. Ronald nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. I think I understand. It's like when someone takes the time to remember your name or asks you how you're doing. It makes you feel like you're more than just a number. A soft murmur of agreement ran through the room, and Denise smiled, grateful for Ronald's honesty. Thank you, Ronald. That's exactly what we're aiming for. It's not always easy, but it makes all the difference. After the training session, Denise and Eric lingered in the conference room, chatting with employees who had questions or feedback about the session. Ronald, however, remained seated, deep in thought. After a moment, he approached them, his expression earnest. Mr. and Mrs. Jones, he began, his voice steady but laced with a vulnerability that hadn't been there before. I just wanted to say, I appreciate what you're trying to do here. I didn't understand it at first, but I think I'm starting to see it now. Eric nodded, his smile warm. We're glad to hear that, Ronald. We know this hasn't been easy, but we appreciate your willingness to be open. Ronald hesitated, glancing down as if gathering his thoughts. You know, I've been working in hotels my whole life. My father was a porter in one of the old downtown hotels, and he always told me to keep my head down, follow the rules, and not get too close to the guests. He thought that was the best way to keep a job. He paused, a faint, rueful smile crossing his face. I guess I just carried that with me all these years. Denise placed a comforting hand on his arm. Sometimes it takes a fresh perspective to help us see things differently. And you're part of that change, Ronald. We want everyone here, including you, to feel that they're part of something special. Ronald nodded, his gaze softening. Thank you, Mayam. I appreciate that. As he walked away, Eric and Denise exchanged a glance, both sensing the significance of the moment. Ronald had come a long way from his initial resistance, and though he still had room to grow, the Joneses knew that this was a breakthrough. That evening, the hotel hosted a reception in the main lobby, inviting both guests and staff to join in a celebration of the Marquise's new direction. The reception hall was elegantly decorated, with soft lights casting a warm glow over the room, and tables laden with hors d'oeuvres and sparkling drinks. A jazz trio played softly in the background, creating an atmosphere of relaxed sophistication. As guests mingled, Eric and Denise moved through the crowd, greeting familiar faces and introducing themselves to newcomers. Jaden, dressed smartly in a blazer, helped serve drinks alongside the staff, eager to play his part in the evening. Ronald stood at the edge of the room, observing the scene with a newfound appreciation. The reception wasn't about impressing wealthy clients or showing off luxury, it was about creating a genuine sense of community. He watched as the Jones family interacted with guests, laughing and chatting as if they were welcoming old friends into their home. A guest approached Ronald, an older gentleman with a warm smile. Good evening, the man greeted. Lovely event, isn't it? Ronald nodded, a genuine smile finally gracing his face. Yes, it is. It's different from what I'm used to, but I think it's exactly what we needed. The guest chuckled, nodding in agreement. Well, I have to say, I've been coming to the Marquise for years, and I can already tell that there's something special happening here. It feels more personal, somehow. Ronald's smile grew, and for the first time he felt a sense of pride in the changes he had once resisted. Yes, he agreed, his voice steady. It's about more than just business now. As the evening wore on, Eric raised a glass, capturing everyone's attention with a gentle tap on the microphone. The room quieted, and all eyes turned to him. Thank you all for being here tonight, he began, his voice filled with warmth. This evening is about celebrating not just the future of the Marquise, but the incredible team of people who make it what it is. Each of you, from our guests to our staff, is part of this community. We're honored to have you with us, and we look forward to many more nights like this. A round of applause echoed through the room, and as glasses clinked and laughter filled the air, the Marquise felt truly alive. Ronald raised his own glass, his heart lighter than it had been in years. He finally understood that this hotel was no longer just a job, it was a place of connection, a place where everyone, guest and employee alike, could feel at home. The night ended with a sense of quiet satisfaction, the kind that came from knowing that something meaningful had taken root. The Jones family had done more than just run a hotel. They had created a legacy, one built on kindness, respect, and the belief that every person mattered. And as they watched the final guests depart, Eric, Denise, and Jaden knew that the Marquise would stand as a beacon of hope and inclusivity, a testament to what was possible when people were willing to change. A few months later, the Marquise reopened with a new look, fresh policies, and a renewed spirit. The lobby was brighter, featuring artwork that celebrated the diversity of the city and mirrored the hotel's commitment to inclusion. There were subtle changes in the details: a welcome card in each room in multiple languages, a display featuring local artisans, and a staff roster that included people from all backgrounds. On the day of the reopening, the Jones family stood together in the lobby, welcoming guests to the newly transformed hotel. The atmosphere was buzzing with excitement as familiar faces and new visitors alike filled the space, eager to see the changes firsthand. Ronald, now a lead trainer for new staff members, approached Eric and Denise, his face glowing with pride. The once reluctant Clerk had become an enthusiastic advocate for the new vision, having embraced the value of connection and warmth. "I never thought I'd say this," he admitted, chuckling, "but I'm grateful for every change you brought to this place. It feels like a different world." Eric clapped him on the back, smiling. "That's because it is, Ronald, and you've been a big part of making that happen." As the grand reopening continued, guests commented on the sense of belonging that seemed to permeate the hotel. Regulars noted the friendlier atmosphere, the more welcoming staff, and the attention to detail that showed genuine care. Even Jaden, now fully involved in the family business, was greeted with warm smiles as he spoke with guests, his confidence growing as he realized the positive impact of his family's work. At the end of the day, as the final guests left, the Jones family took a moment to stand together in the now empty lobby. They looked around, taking in the space that had once been just a business and was now a place of purpose and pride. For Eric, Denise, and Jaden, it was more than just a hotel. It was a legacy, a testament to what was possible when kindness and respect led the way. As they turned off the lights, the family left the Marquise with hearts full of hope, knowing that they had built something that would welcome everyone, forever carrying the warmth of their values in every corner.